Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Nathan Rogers, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Lance Corporal Justin Wilshaw. This evening, we commemorate the 109th anniversary of the start of the Third Battle of Ypres. After mid-1917, following mutinies in the overstrained French army, British forces assumed an even greater role in the war on the Western Front. Attacking from Ypres in Belgium, the British Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Sir Douglas Haig, sought to break out of the so-called Ypres salient and reclaim the Belgian coastline from the German army. Following the success of Messines in June, which removed the Germans from the British southern flank, the offensive began in earnest on the 31st of July, 1917. Australian forces were brought into the offensive on the 20th of September, where they took part in an attack along Menin Road. Attacking on a narrow front, supported by immense amounts of firepower, the battle was a great success. Further successful advances followed at Polygon Wood on the 26th of September and at Broadsender on the 4th of October. The fighting went on in appalling weather and with crippling losses. The Australians taking part in unsuccessful attacks at Polkapelle on the 9th of October and Passchendaele on the 12th of October. In just over a week, there were almost 11,000 Australian casualties. Finally, with the British Army stuck in the low-lying muddy fields churned up by months of artillery fire, the bloody offensive came to an untidy end in November. Many would afterwards refer to this offensive, actually a series of battles, by the name of the village that had become the last objective, Passchendaele. All 5 Australian divisions took part in the Third Battle of Ypres. In 8 weeks of fighting, they had incurred over 38,000 casualties. No breakthrough was achieved. The costly offensives, ending with the capture of Passchendaele village after the Australians had been relieved by the Canadian Corps, widened the Ypres salient by a few kilometres. Official historian Charles Bryen later reflected on the carnage, writing, "I have often thought that many a youngster, when he was hit out there on the Passchendaele heights, and he knew that the end had come, must have thought to himself, well, at least they'll remember me in Australia." Today, we remember the Third Battle of Ypres. We pay our respects to the men and women commemorated here on the Roll of Honour and to the survivors who returned home. 2026 marks 125 years of dedicated service by the Australian Army and its predecessors. Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Frederick Edward Bryan. We are honoured to acknowledge the Head of Joint Intelligence Directorate Singapore Armed Forces, Brigadier General Cam Kai King, accompanied by Head of Intelligence Assessment, Major General Mark Askoff. We warmly welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We warmly welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by visitors to the memorial. And if you are able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is got by sea. Our land, a
The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bryan, Australia's first World War official historian. Bryan landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bryan's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bryan's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Frederick Edward Bryan. Frederick Bryan was born in 1889, the second of 6 children, 4 girls and 2 boys, born to Patterson and Elizabeth Bryan in the Kangaroo Valley region south of Sydney. Known as Fred to his family and friends, he worked as a dairy farmer, first in the Dapto area and later in Rosebank, north of East Lismore, in the far north of New South Wales. In 1916, he married Irene Stennett, also from a dairy farming family who had moved from the south coast of New South Wales to the Lismore area. Bryan enlisted into the Australian Imperial Force on the 4th of October 1917 and soon joined the reinforcements of the 19th Australian Infantry Battalion. He served in the reinforcements of the 19th Battalion alongside his brother-in-law, Ashley Stennett. His younger brother, Robert, enlisted around the same time and later served on the Western Front in the 56th Battalion. Robert Bryan survived the war. Fred Bryan embarked from Sydney on the 11th of November 1916 aboard the transport ship Swavic, alongside his brother-in-law Ashley. Troop ships were crowded with many men from many different walks of life, and outbreaks of disease could pose serious problems for a battalion on its way to the front. In December 1916, Bryan disembarked from Swavic alongside his brother-in-law Ashley in Cape Town, South Africa, suffering from a case of the measles. He remained in hospital there for several months recovering from his illness. His brother-in-law, Ashley Stennett's condition deteriorated and he died of pneumonia on Christmas Day 1916. On the 23rd of March 1917, Fred Bryan was well enough to return to duty and embarked from Cape Town aboard the troop ship SS Ballarat, once more bound for Europe. On the afternoon of Anzac Day 1917, as Ballarat entered the English Channel, the ship was struck by a torpedo launched by a German U-boat. All 1,700 passengers on board, Bryan included, were able to evacuate and no one was killed. But Ballarat sank the next day in the English Channel. Days later, Bryan joined a training battalion in Durrington, England, but after just 2 months, he was once again hospitalised with illness, this time with the mumps. He remained in hospital for 3 weeks, and in July 1917, he rejoined the 10th Training Battalion in Durrington. On the 10th of September 1917, he was finally ready for service on the Western Front and departed from Southampton for Europe. He joined the 37th Battalion on the 23rd of September behind the lines near Hazebrouck, Belgium, conducting mock battles with other Australian units in preparation for a major attack. On the 3rd of October 1917, he and his unit were informed that at dawn on the 4th of October, they would be taking part in a major Allied attack aimed at taking a series of ridges held by the German to the east of Ypres. In this major attack, part of the long-running Third Battle of Ypres, Australian, New Zealand and British troops attacked along a 13-kilometre wide front. The main Australian objective was the ridge at Broodzinda. Rain fell the night before the attack, creating difficult and muddy conditions. Shortly before 6 a.m, the Allies began an artillery barrage attack on the German lines. When the Australians jumped out of their trenches into no man's land, they found themselves confronted with heavy German shrapnel and machine gun fire. They also faced a simultaneous attack by German troops who had launched their own infantry attack at the same time. The attack was ultimately successful and the Allies took their objectives, but it came at a heavy cost. Australia lost some 6,500 casualties in the battle. New Zealand lost 1,700. Bryan was one of the Australians killed in the battle. Shortly after his unit climbed out of the trenches, he was struck in the head by a fragment of German shrapnel, and that killed him instantly. He was buried in the shell hole where he fell. Fred Bryan was 27 years old and died exactly a year after his enlistment into the Australian Imperial Force. He had been with the 37th Battalion in Belgium for less than 2 weeks. He was survived by his grieving family and young wife. The couple had been married for a little over a year. He is now buried in the Tyencott Cemetery in Belgium, where nearly 12,000 British and Commonwealth servicemen of the First World War are buried or commemorated. Private Frederick Edward Bryan is also listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is one, but many of the stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Frederick Edward Bryan, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. And at the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they'll be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.